If I seem a little distracted, I just want you to know I will be looking back and forth to participants that are joining us, making sure they're able to get in, and also monitoring the chat box. So you'll have to forgive me if I seem to be multitasking. Without further delay, we are recording this. I just want to make sure that all the new people that joined us understand that this is being recorded. Still letting people on. Hello, for those of you of whom I have not had the pleasure to meet, I'm Fran Solomon and I'm the founder of Heal Grief, where we have Home of Actively Moving Forward in our AMF app. We are thrilled to bring you this evening an interactive webinar on transition and the afterlife with our very special guest, Julie Ryan. Julie is an inventor, entrepreneur, and author who learned to be a psychic and medical intuitive more than 25 years ago. Julie can sense what medical conditions and illnesses a person has and facilitate energetic healings. She can tell how close someone is to death and can communicate with spirits, both alive and deceased. Julie can communicate with and medically scan animals, access people's past lives, and remove spirits from homes and buildings. Julie has authored Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life to the Next, Angel Messages for Kids, and Angel Messages for Dogs. She is also a podcast host for Ask Julie Ryan with listeners from all over the world, many whom call in to partake in Julie's buffet of psychicness. Julie, we are delighted to have you join us.
Oh, my pleasure. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday evening. Happy weekend beginning.
And I'm sure we're all ready for it. But I do want to say, before we dive into the conversation, I want to welcome our audience to ask questions via the chat box. I'd like everybody to know that as much as we'd like to answer all questions, we will do our best to answer as many as time allows. However, please be mindful that time will only allow us to ask general questions, questions of general nature. So Julie, I'm going to dive in. Let me start the conversation off with the research and studies about how end-of-life patients appear to be talking with or believe the presence of those who have gone before them. Can you shed light on that?
Sure, absolutely. That's what my book, Angelic Attendants, is about, is how we're surrounded by the spirits of our deceased loved ones and angels, and even the spirits of deceased pets as we're approaching death. And everybody goes through what I call the 12 phases of transition, which is a configuration of how the angels and our loved ones are positioned. And they change positions as the person is getting closer to death. All of this information's been corroborated with university-based research by a doctor, I tease him, his name's Chris Kerr, and I tease him, I call him a doctor. And he did university-based research on 1,400 patients, hospice patients. He's the director of a big hospice facility and organization in Buffalo, New York. And he did university-based research on 1,400 of his hospice patients. Close to 90% of whom report seeing spirits of deceased loved ones and the spirits of deceased pets as they're approaching death, either in visions or in dreams. So I tease them, I tell them I love it when science catches up with woo-woo, because I think people have been able to see this since the beginning of time. And I talk about lots of stories in my book, but I also talk with people every day who are individual clients and others. Just through my show, people call into my show, and the stories I hear are just amazing about conversations with deceased loved ones as the person is getting close to death.
Yeah, so is it your opinion, so is it an imagination? Do you believe it to be an imagination in someone making a transition, or do you actually believe that there are people from the other side that are actually perhaps welcoming them?
Oh no, and I think a lot of us think, well, grandma's just hallucinating. Grandma's not hallucinating when she's talking to her deceased mother who's been gone for 50 years or longer. And I'm able to see those people too, their spirits. And so I can describe them to the family and they'll say, oh, that's Grandma Ann, or that's, Fluffy, her poodle that she had when she was alive. But in Dr. Kerr's research, his patients were all double and triple screened for dementia. They weren't on medication that could cause them to hallucinate. That was a very rigorous study that was run. And as you mentioned, I'm an inventor of surgical devices sold throughout the world. And before I was allowed to sell my products, I had to do clinical studies we did them through universities, a couple big universities. So I know what's involved in those those studies and getting it through the institutional review board full of professors and doctors and all those people at these big universities. So no, it's very rigorous to be sure that these patients are not hallucinating.
So, Julie, there's a difference between someone who has a natural death versus someone that might have an unexpected death due to a tragedy. So a person with an unexpected death doesn't have that opportunity to have I'm assuming, doesn't have the spirits or those welcoming them. Can you help us? How is their transition different than someone in end of life?
It's not, it's all the same. We all go through what I call the 12 phases of transition, regardless of how we die. If it's very quickly, like in the case of a homicide or a suicide, or whether it's prolonged. I had a woman call into my show for 2 years, and her father was in phase 11 of 12 for 2 years with Alzheimer's. And everybody goes through the phases. The way that I explain it, however, and why it's the same for everybody is because time doesn't exist in the spirit world. Time is a human creation. And so it's feasible that a nanosecond in the spirit world may be 100 years in our understanding of time. So that's what I see. And the other thing I think that's important to mention too is we all decide when we go, where we go, how we go, and who's with us when we go, regardless of the circumstances. And so really, if you think about it, if we're all deciding, if our spirits are deciding when we're going to go and how we're going to go and who's with us and all of that, really all death is a form of suicide because we decide how and when and all of that, which is a different way to look at death, I think, especially when we consider that the person who's dying is the one that's running the show. Case in point, my mother-in-law right now decided to come home from the hospital and go on hospice and pass at home. And she lives close by you, Fran, in the Hollywood Hills. And she was brought home by ambulance today. And my son was going to see her this evening, and he was so upset. And I said, honey, it doesn't get any better than this. She gets to decide, how this is going to happen for her, and how wonderful that she's going to be surrounded by family. And her best friend came to visit her this afternoon. They're both 96, by the way. So yeah, it really adds, when you bring in the spirits that are present and the angels, it really adds a glorious component to what is normally just such a heart-wrenching situation.
So I forgive me, I want to challenge you on that.
Okay.
So for our community members that some have had the opportunity to be with loved ones in end of life, mm-hmm. who have died, others have had loved ones taken tragically, mm-hmm. and others who have had loved ones that may have suicided. Mm-hmm. So when you say everyone has a choice, I'm having difficulty. For example, the homicide is not a choice. So educate me on that, because I'm struggling with saying, how can the homicide be a choice?
Because it's a choice of the spirit. Our spirit chooses how we go, when we go, where we go, all of that. And we don't know what that spirit came in to explore in this lifetime. It's been my experience that we all live many, 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 many lifetimes. And what I see when I talk to spirit and hear from spirit is they wanted to explore it in this lifetime in this way. It could be that perhaps they were the parent of, the sibling of, the spouse of somebody that was killed in a homicide. In this round, they wanted to experience it to be the person who was killed. And I'll see a basic script continue through multiple lifetimes. It's very, very common where, like what I said, we'll assume a different role so we can look at the same basic script through a different perspective, regardless of how horrific it is to us in our human experience. To spirit, the spirit expands every time we have a new perspective of an experience. I talk in analogies a lot when I'm talking about this woo-woo stuff. And my analogy for this is, think about Hamlet. I think Shakespeare's been dead for like 500 or 600 years. How many times has Hamlet, the play, been performed? Who knows? Probably countless. I don't know that we could even calculate it. But think about the times it's been performed. What languages? What country? What was happening in the world? Who were the actors? Who was the director? Who was the costume designer? All of that. Same script, different perspective in each time that it was performed. So I think that's a great analogy of how I perceive and have heard from spirit thousands of times over the years about how this works. What we see as horrific is horrific. No negating that from the human perspective, but from the spiritual side, it's just an experience.
Interesting, because we have a question that came in, a child can choose when, as a question. And so if I'm understanding what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong or need to shed more light to expand it, we may be seeing a person, we may be seeing an infant or a child, but the spirit is not. And the legacies of the spirit and the history or the experiences of the spirit create a very different reality for us here.
I guess I don't really quite understand your question.
I don't know that it was a question. I
okay.
wanted to see if I'm understanding what you're saying.
The spirit, to spirits, there's no good or bad, wrong or right. It's just an experience. In the human world, obviously there's wrong and right. We have to have that. We can't go around shooting each other and, harming each other. But to the spirit, it's just an experience. And the personality of the person stays with the body when somebody dies. All spirits are pure love. That's all a spirit knows how to do, is give love. But to your point, Fran, earlier this afternoon, I had a private client, and it was her and her mother-in-law on the phone. And her baby at 1.5 passed a couple of years ago. His name was John. So I kept calling him Baby John. And we had a conversation with Baby John, and he came in, and the first thing he said was, "Hi, Mommy." It was just so cute, just melted my heart. He is pure love. She asked him point blank. She said, "Did you decide to go?" Because he was sick apparently from the time he was born and was in the hospital most of his 1.5 years of life. And she said, "Did you choose this?" And he said, "Yes." And she said, "Did you choose the date that you died?" And he said, "Well, I chose it, but it wasn't preordained. I had just experienced everything I wanted to in this round, basically this lifetime." And I hear that many, many times. So again, it's hard for us to wrap our human minds around that. Why in the heck would anybody choose to die in a horrific way, or die in a way like this baby, who'd been sick for all those years? But his spirit wanted to explore it. And I explained to his mother and his grandmother, same thing I just mentioned earlier, which is, we don't know what his spirit explored in other lifetimes. Maybe he was the parent of a small child that died. Maybe he was the sibling. Maybe he was the, the grandparent or the doctor or another caregiver. Certainly we'll know when we all go back to non-physical and we all go to heaven. Everybody goes to heaven. But right now, is it feasible? Yeah, it is to me.
So interesting. So a follow-up question is, so a 2-year-old spirit is older than the human body?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Spirits are all, they've been around a really long time, many, many, many lifetimes. I do past life work, and that is so much fun, you guys. Oh my gosh, because we'll get information on past lives that'll give us information a lot of the time that we can corroborate with historical documents online. And I would say, I can't make this stuff up. And some of the lifetimes are BC, even that come in, and even older than that. May I share a couple of stories on past lives?
Please, I just would like to get to one other question that would,
Okay.
and I think we'd all love to hear it. A question is, so are they literally here with us? What happened to him? I guess, or are the spirits literally here with us?
Absolutely, all the time. And our heads are big satellite dishes. They receive and they transmit frequencies. Every spirit has a frequency they keep throughout all of their lifetimes. And how you connect with them is you just think of them, and it tunes your satellite dish head to their frequency. Did any of you see the TV show Bewitched that was on in the 60s? And maybe you saw reruns of it. That was my favorite show. I wanted to be Samantha Stevens when I grew up, and now I kind of am. I mean, I could do all the stuff she could do. So for those of you that are unfamiliar with Bewitched, perhaps from England or another country, it was a Fran, what was it? It was a sitcom. It was a TV show that was on in the 60s, I believe, and 70s. And it was about a woman who was a witch who married a man who was just a regular human.
Mortal.
a mere mortal. And she would yell, "Mother," and her mother's name was Endora. And Endora would immediately come in. Or she'd yell, "Dr. Bombay," and Dr. Bombay would immediately come in. So our spirits, our loved ones, our deceased loved ones, and really any spirit, it doesn't matter whether you knew them or not. Who do you want to talk to? You want to talk to Napoleon or Aristotle or whomever, Mother Teresa? You think of them, they immediately come in. Likewise, if you're doing something random like folding laundry or driving in the car somewhere, and you're not thinking about your loved one, but they come into your head all of a sudden, that's them letting you know that they're with you. And do you want to know how you can talk to them? Should we go through that, Fran?
I'm sure our members would love that.
Okay. It's really easy, and everybody has the ability to do this. And this is what I teach in my classes to people all over the world. The only prerequisite for my classes is you got to speak English, because that's the only language I speak. A little wee and, CC here every now and again, but that's about it as far as other languages. So all you have to do is think of them. They immediately come in, and you can either say something to them in your head or aloud, because spirit communicates telepathically. So you say something to them, they're going to answer you. It's going to feel like it's a thought in your head, but how you know it's your loved one spirit is it comes in fast as you can snap your fingers within a second. If you think about it for more than a couple of seconds, that's going to be your brain talking to you, but it's going to come in quickly. The other thing that spirit does, back to the concept that time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So oftentimes when you say something to your deceased loved one, they're going to answer you before you even have the thought out all the way, which is really wild when that happens. Have any of you experienced that yet? Yeah, I see some heads shaking. And you think, well, what's going on with that? Well, it's because, again, time doesn't exist in the spirit world. So they've already got your thought before you've had time to think it all the way out, and they're already sending you an answer. So the more you do this, the more you talk with your deceased loved ones, the more validation you're going to get. The more validation you get, the more you trust it. The more you trust it, then it just becomes second nature. And everybody can do it. And I think most of us do it all the time, but we just don't believe that the answers we're getting are really coming from our loved ones. So again, you'll know it's the first thing that pops into your head within a second, and that's them answering you.
So we have a question. Do you ever enhance your spirit conversations with psychedelics or medications?
No, not necessary. I turn my abilities on and off at will. Takes me a nanosecond. There are a lot of schools of thought that you need to meditate for an hour or something. I'm a businesswoman. Cut to the chase. Who do you want to talk to? A lot of mediums will say, well, let me see who's around you. I'm like, who do you want to talk to? We bring them in. We think of them, boom, they're right here. We have a conversation with them. It's really that simple.
What about individuals trying to find the connection with their person?
Think of your person, say something to them. They're going to answer you within a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we have a question.
Easy peasy, easy peasy, easy peasy.
So we have a question. So are we still us, our consciousness, but then suddenly just also aware of our spirit side and past after we pass?
What I hear from spirit, great question. What I hear from spirit is we're the same. We're just in a different we're in a different reality, and we are non-physical at that point. So an analogy is, do you remember those old emergency rooms and even patient rooms when they used to have two patients to a bed and they'd pull the curtain in between the bed? Like you weren't able to hear the doctor or the family members. I mean, really, come on. But when the drape was open, you could see the patient in the other bed, whether that be in a hospital room or in the emergency room. And when they pull the curtain, you can't see them, but you know they're still there. And then go back to your science lessons. You know, water can be liquid, water can turn into a gas, water can be solid. Same thing, same spirit, different form. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. So we have a question. Could you talk a little bit more on how transition, I kind of got bounced around, on how transition by suicide looks like? What is the person, in this case, a teenage boy, likely to experience?
Well, the same thing that everybody experiences when they pass. And what spirit tells me is it's like you close your eyes, you're going to sleep, and you wake up and you're in non-physical. It's not painful. It's instant as they perceive it, as spirit perceives it. And remember, they're surrounded by deceased loved ones and angels and the spirits of deceased pets. So there's really a glorious component to it from the spirit side. And that's why I've been called to do this work. May I share this story, Fran, of how I even wrote the book? I, as an inventor of surgical devices and being in the medical business for decades, I was interested in helping people heal, which is what brought me to this whole medical intuitive, energy healing thing. And spirit's been a byproduct of that, with the 12 phases of transition and all of that came in. And the first time I saw the 12 phases was when my own mother was dying in 2002. And I was watching all these angels and all these different configurations. And at the beginning, I thought, oh my God, am I having a midlife crisis or a hot flash or something? Or am I imagining it? And no, I wasn't, as it continued to progress. So a couple of years later, I was with my mentor, and this dead Pope spirit showed up. And he had the Pope hat on and the Pope outfit and the whole 9 yards. And I said to him, well, who are you? And my mentor, Susan, could see him as well, his spirit. And he said, I'm Clement. And I said, okay. I thought, I never heard of a Pope Clement, but okay. And I told him, I said, oh, okay. I've never heard of a Pope Clement. He said, well, I was number 6. And he was kind of laughing. I said, great. How can I help you? And he said, well, you're supposed to teach the world what happens when somebody dies, because it's been so bastardized over the millennia by religions and cultures. And other entities. And you need to teach people around the world how there's a glorious component to it and there's nothing to be afraid of. Everybody goes to heaven, you know, all of that. And so I said to the spirit, you guys, I said, I'm not doing that. I'm a businesswoman and everybody's going to think I'm nuts. And he said, yeah, just get on with it. So I went out to my car to leave, and I just for kicks, I Googled Pope Clement VI. Guess what? He was in office during the Black Plague when 2/3 of Europe died. And he's best known for his prayers for the dying and his prayers for the dead. And I said, okay, Ryan, you can't make that up. And so it took several years of him prodding me for me to get enough courage. You know, girls have golden ovary courage, boys have brass balls, girls have golden ovaries, you know. So it took a couple of years for me to get enough golden ovary courage to be able to put myself out there and do this. And now the thing that's so amazing about it is the amount of comfort that this information brings to families who've lost a loved one. And my books at my church, it's given out to everybody coming in to plan a funeral. I have churches and synagogues from all over the country and even abroad that will email me and say, hey, we want to use your book for a Bible study or a book club. Can we buy a couple cases at a discounted rate? And of course, I'm delighted to give it to them. So it's been really interesting. If you go on my website, askjulieryan.com, there are graphics of the 12 phases of transition. And there was a family not too long ago that used the chart. They had a loved one who was dying, big family. And when people would arrive at the house, they would just hand them the chart. And my friend, who was the sister-in-law of the woman who was dying, she said, this is a big Italian family. These people normally would be bouncing off the walls, you know, with emotion. She said, everybody's calm. Everybody understands that she's surrounded by angels and deceased loved ones. And she said, I have never seen anything like it. So I guess Pope Clement knew what he was doing when he recruited me, because it's providing a lot of comfort, even though I didn't know who he was and never heard of him.
Good pick.
Yeah.
So another question. So do our loved ones know that they transition?
Yes. Yeah, they do. Sometimes there'll be ghosts. Can we talk about ghosts for a second?
Yeah, and I also think that our audience would really like to know about signs.
Okay, yeah. So ghosts, I have a fun story about ghosts. Ghosts are spirits that have transitioned and they want to explore. Again, our spirits want to explore things in the human world. And they want to explore being a spirit, but being in the human world, kind of like 1 foot in the spirit world, 1 foot in the human world kind of thing. So several years ago, my son's best friend's family, they were at grandma's house. They call her Mimi. They were at Mimi's house, and two of the daughters were in the kitchen on Thanksgiving, fixing Thanksgiving dinner. And they watched these antique spoons and stuff that were hanging on the wall come up off the wall and fall on the cabinet, on the countertop and the floor. So they're calling me going, what the heck is this? What's going on? And so I scanned it. I can do an instant replay, kind of like you're watching a football game and there's a touchdown and they do an instant replay so you can watch it again. And so what we found was there were two spirits there. One was a father who was a farmer. The other, I live in Alabama. So the other, and this happened here in Birmingham, was a Confederate soldier. He had his gray Confederate uniform on and all of that. They gave me their name. They were looking for this soldier's daughter, who was a little girl. And the little girl had already died and she had passed. So I called the spirit of the little girl in and got them reunited, the three of them. And heaven looks like this big whitish, yellowish plasma wall to me. It looks different to other people, but that's how I perceive it. And so they went through the plasma wall into the light. Well, the fun part of this story is we got their name. The farmer said that was his farm, all this other information. All of it was corroborated with historical documents. One of the grandsons found the deed to the original property. It had this family's name on it, you know, from before the Civil War. and it had the plot of land that this housing development had been made out of. And that's just a fun example of information that we get from spirit that we can corroborate with historical documents when we look for them.
So what about actually having physical contact?
Yeah. Physical contact, meaning they're a spirit, so it's kind of like vapor.
I mean, I'm reading the question. What about having actual physical contact with the spirit?
Can you expand
maybe
on
a
that? Whoever
feeling?
asked the question, or unmute yourself and ask the question. Whoever submitted that question.
I did.
Okay, Ashley.
As you were saying, I do have things that fly off the wall a lot,
There you go.
all the time.
Yeah.
But ever since, I will have bruises on my body where I can't put them in the shape handprints. I mean, I can't do what it is there, if that makes sense.
Yeah, sure. So that's a phenomenon that spirit's trying to get close to you. Remember, all spirits are pure love. It's kind of like the sun. All the sun can do is shine sunshine. And all spirits can do is give you love. So yes, that happens every now and again. And it's somebody getting your attention, obviously, to do that. So somebody that's using that. Also, people will feel things like they'll feel like their loved one gives them a hug, or they'll feel like what's really interesting is, I don't know if any of you have any pets that perhaps maybe you'll be sitting in a room watching TV at night and there won't be anybody in the room with you, but the pet's head will turn almost as if they're watching somebody walk across the room. That's very common. Cats and dogs do that a lot. So, that's something that happens in the physical world as well. And when things go flying off the walls and all of that, it's somebody trying to get your attention. Also, it can be a spirit that has just gone back into non-physical, and they're getting used to using their energy again, because our reality is very dense and spirit's reality isn't. I use the analogy of, imagine trying to run an electrical current through a bowl of pudding. It's going to slow it down because of the mass of the pudding. So does that answer your question, Ashley? Okay, good.
Great, thank you. And another question, I think you've answered this, but does everyone transition to the same place, or can we get stuck?
No, we don't get stuck. Everybody goes to heaven. Everybody's carried to heaven with angels, as I perceive it. And so, no, I think the getting stuck thing is the spirit wanting to explore something more during that time. So everybody transitions, and the example of the ghosts, they want to come back and they want to explore it. That's my understanding of
Great.
it.
We're getting a lot of questions coming in. Does
Great.
the use of morphine change the death process in any way?
I think it can speed it up, because what it does is it restricts breathing, from what I understand. But again, the spirit is in control of all of that. The spirit's in control. The person whose spirit is attached to the body that's dying, they're in control of all of that, how fast they leave and when they leave and who's with them. You talk to any funeral director, and they have endless stories about the family sat with grandma for 2 weeks, and Aunt Mary was on duty, and she left the room to go get a cup of coffee, and grandma slipped away while nobody was in the room with her. Well, really? But it's endless. I think funeral directors in particular can tell us stories about that.
Great. Going back to signs, what about the lights, especially lights that haven't worked, and also a cool breeze coming over you?
Yes, those are all signs, all kinds of signs. That when this afternoon, when I was talking to the mom and the grandmother, and their baby John was in heaven with his great grandmother, and she was showing me this quilt, and I was describing it. The family was from Ireland, and she was describing it. And during the time, the grandmother said, "You've just described the quilt that's on the end of my bed. I'm going to send you a picture of it." So that's an example of a sign from spirit too. We get those all the time. When something happens, you find something and you think, "Oh, my dad sent that," or "My grandmother sent that," or whatever. And then you think, "Oh, that's just my imagination." Follow that, the first thing that comes into your head. That's always right. It's that first thing. Boom, boom, boom. Comes in as fast as you can snap your fingers. Great. Have some of you gotten signs that you think are your loved ones? Yeah. Okay.
For sure.
Great.
Another question. Do dreams have any significance?
Oh, absolutely. Spirit comes in dreams all the time. And the difference between a dream and a visit, as I call it, is the visit feels like it's in high def. The colors are extra vibrant and the senses are heightened, and it's very vivid, and you remember details that you normally wouldn't remember from a dream. So those are visits. And then a lot of people will do meetups in their dreams. Before they go to sleep, they'll say to their loved one, "Okay, meet you in Honolulu at the beach, Waikiki Beach," or something. And then they'll have a dream about it. And so that's a way to be able to meet up with your loved ones. The reason why dreams and visions are so common with our loved ones coming to us is because our brain has quieted down. You know, our ego of, is this real? Is this fake? Am I imagining that? All of that, that's really tamped down. So spirit can get in to communicate with us during those times when we're dreaming and remembering it.
Great. Do you think that grief and tears keep our person from doing what they need to do on the other side?
Absolutely not. No. When we're in human form and also when we're in spirit form, let's talk about human form first. We can't control anybody else's thoughts, and therefore nobody can control our thoughts either. And our loved ones, people say, "Well, it's kind of creepy when I think my deceased granddad is around me all the time when I'm in the shower and all of that." They're not intrusive like that, and they're not reading our thoughts. When we ask them something, they're going to respond, but they're not in there, reading our thoughts and trying to anticipate what we're doing. They're there to help us and give us guidance if we ask for it, but they're not intrusive about it. So when we feel grief, it's our humanness that's feeling grief. Our spirit is in pure joy, pure love. And our spirit wants us to experience whatever our spirit wants to experience. And when we're feeling grief, our spirit is choosing to feel that grief because it's benefiting us in some way. Every experience that we have in life is a one-time thing in all of creation. It's the only time that your spirit is going to experience that whatever at that moment in time, in this year, on this date, at this time. And that all expands the collective consciousness because it's all a unique experience to us. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess that goes into one of the other questions. Can the spirit of a loved one suffer if they see us suffering? So I suspect the answer is no.
Correct. Yes. Spirits are all pure love, pure joy. And think of the sun shining. The sun just shines. The sun doesn't care if you're inside, outside, have sunscreen on or not. It doesn't matter. It just shines. And that's what spirit does. It's pure love. And that's all it can do is just send you love and exhibit love. And love, everything that comes with love is joy. It's joyful. When you feel neutral or good, you're in alignment with your spirit because spirit is pure love and pure joy.
What about a Ouija board?
What about it?
What about a Ouija board? That's
Who
the
asked
question.
the question? Anybody want to expand on that? If you want to mute yourself.
McKenna?
Yeah, is it Is that another form of like talking with spirit?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And journaling is a way to do it. What do they call it? The writing, you know, they'll channel with writing. The Ouija board is just another way to do it. It's a mechanism. Been around a long time. We used to use it at slumber parties when I was a kid. We used to try to get each other to levitate. It never worked. That was long before I learned how to do woo-woo. Did any of you guys do that? But none of you are old enough to remember that.
I did.
Did you do it, Fran?
I did.
At slumber parties, and there'd be a bunch of girls, and we'd all have our hands underneath.
And you actually lived for a minute. Yeah, you actually lived for a few seconds. It was
hilarious.
Pretty wild.
Yeah.
A question coming in. Let's see. So it's a bit long of a read. So what about people who have done horrible things in life? What goes on with them? You mentioned a Confederate soldier showing up. I would not be able to talk to him. How does all that play out? So let's go to the first half of the question. What about people who've done horrible things in life? What goes on with them?
The personality stays with the body when somebody dies. That's the human experience. Remember, their spirit wants to explore something in this lifetime in a certain way. So we think of the most awful person in our world. The person that comes to mind a lot is Hitler. We think, oh my God, you know, we hope he was burning in hell forever. Well, that was Hitler's personality. His personality stayed with his body. His spirit is pure love and pure joy. It's in heaven with everybody else's, which is really hard for us to wrap our human minds around that somebody that could have caused that much horror is in heaven. But that's how it works. That's what I've heard over and over and over again from thousands and thousands of times. Again, we go back to, what did Hitler experience in past lives before he incarnated, you know, in whenever he was born, probably in, I don't know, the early 1900s or something. You know, was he persecuted? Was he abused? Was he whatever? What was it that he went through that this round he wanted to explore and experience what it was like to be the one that was causing all of that horror for mankind? Right. Don't expect you to wrap your head around it. It's a tough concept, but that's what I've been told repeatedly.
Yeah. So someone shared that they've had over 30 signs.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Like what? I'd love to hear them.
They're not listed, and I have a slew of questions here.
Okay. All right.
So towards the end, maybe we'll be able to circle back around there. So can they, I assume the spirit, manipulate electronic things such as songs that play? In other words, can they send us songs?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And two interesting things about electronics. I'm on the board of a project at the University of Arizona called the Soul Phone Project. Have any of you heard of the Soul Phone Project? Yeah, a couple of you are shaking your heads. And so what they're doing is they're developing the professor there is developing with a team of scientists an app that's going to go on a cell phone that you can use to talk to your deceased loved one. How wild is that? Also, there are two forms of communication. One's called EVP, electronic voice phenomena, if some of you heard of that, where there will be somebody recording and it will be somebody talking to a deceased loved one. One of my graduates of my class lost a child when he was little. I think he was 8 or something. And she talks to him all the time and she'll say, "Hi, Maddie." And she can hear on the recording, "Hi, Mommy." And he talks to her, his spirit does. The other thing that they're able to do, and I'm going to have a woman on my show on October 14th, who's a PhD that has done this research. She now is able to pull in pictures of spirit real time. And it's like you're watching a movie. It's a little fuzzy, but what can happen is her name's Sonia Rinaldi. And so the image is a little fuzzy, like you're broadcasting from Mars or something, those astronaut movies that do that. But they'll put a picture of the person right next to them. It's uncanny how that works.
Wow.
So yeah, there's lots of really advanced things that are being done with electronics to communicate with spirit that are being done in legitimate, big public universities around the world. And they're having tremendous success with it.
Wow. I'm wowed by that. But back to our questions. Do our loved ones miss us?
No, because they're around us all the time. We miss them in human form. But what spirit tells me all the time is, this is great because I can be with all my loved ones all at the same time. And again, hard for us to put that into a human perspective. But I go back to, it says in the Bible, for those of you that have read the Bible, it says we're made in the image and likeness of God. And I think most people believe that, or have been taught perhaps, or have a perception that God's like this old man sitting on a throne on a cloud someplace up in the sky. And he's got, I say he looks like Gandalf or Dumbledore, old man, white hair, long white hair, white beard, all of that. What I perceive is that God is energy. God is the source. So if we're made in the image and likeness of God, and God can be everywhere all at the same time, so can we in spirit form. And so that's what I get corroborated from spirit all the time. It's great because I could be with my mom and my dad and my grandmother and, whoever all at the same time.
So I have two questions in one. Can babies and kids see spirits? And can your loved one transition to ghost form more than once, like come for certain events and then leave?
Yeah. Okay. So let's answer the first question. Can babies and children see spirits? Absolutely. We all come in with the ability, and then it gets tamped down usually around the age of about 7 or 8, when adults say, when a child's talking about their imaginary friend, and they'll say, "Oh, honey, that's just your imagination. That's not real." Well, just because the grown-up can't see it doesn't mean that the child can't see it. And again, there's so many stories. They're endless. This baby John's mom and grandmother today. Baby John has a 4-year-old brother named Thomas. Thomas tells mommy all this stuff about baby John and uses vocabulary words that a 4-year-old doesn't know to describe what he's doing and things like that. That's what my children's books are about, because I've had so many moms over the years say, "Can you please write a children's book that can explain how my child sees my deceased grandfather, who's been dead for 20 years before he was born, knows all this information about him. There's no way he would know. And he's seeing him when he's in his crib. He's a toddler. And can you explain how my child knows this information about past lives that we can corroborate with historical documents? And this kid doesn't read yet. And can you explain some way that I can help my child understand that grandma has passed and grandma's in heaven now, and the 4-year-old saying, "No, she's not. She's sleeping in that box up there at the front of the room," because they're at the funeral home for the visitation hours. So that's what my books are all about. Yes, all little children can see spirits. And the other fun story about this, you guys, is oftentimes I'll have a mom that's just exhausted from sleep deprivation say, "My child wakes up in the middle of the night and just screams, and there's nothing there, and my child is upset." Well, what's going on is there's activity in the room with spirits. And sometimes, did any of you see Toy Story? Well, this is going to be wild for you here. Toy Story, the movie. I have done instant replays on more than one occasion, several actually, where it's like the toys come alive and the spirits are in the room and the toys come alive. The reason why the baby's upset is because they leave, so the baby can go back to sleep. The baby's mad because the toys, want to continue playing, once the activity going on in the room. And there have been many, many parents who have baby monitors, the intercoms, and they hear the baby talking to spirits in the middle of the night, or, squealing with delight while they're watching the toys in the room dance around, like in Toy Story. there's more to this. There's more to that script than meets the eye.
Interesting. So question, how do they guide us? Do they guide us?
Yeah, they do. They're putting ideas in our head, especially when we ask for them. And then again, it's that first thought that comes into your head. Couple of things to remember with spirits when you're communicating with them. Number one, they're super literal. They're always going to give you the correct answer, but they're super literal. So how applicable the information is that you get is going to be determined on how you ask the question. For instance, if you say, are we going to enjoy the movie? And you get a yes, comes into your head right away. And then you guys are watching some movie tonight on TV and it's atrocious. You're saying, Mom, what's up with that? This movie is terrible. Why'd you tell me we'd enjoy it? Well, the way you ask the question could pertain to any movie that you're going to watch for the rest of your life. If you, however, had asked the question, hey, Mom, are we going to enjoy watching Sound of Music on Netflix tonight? See how specific that is? You've given them the movie, how you're going to watch it, and when you're going to watch it. And so if you get an answer that doesn't make sense, rephrase the question, rephrase the statement, keep drilling down on it until you get the information. And you're going to know when it feels like it's the right answer, and you're going to know when it feels like the wrong answer. Just pay attention to that emotion when it comes in. If it feels neutral or good, that's the answer. You're taking it the way that it's intended. If it feels badly or you're resisting it, re-ask the question.
Julie, we have questions still coming in, but we're coming up on our hour, and you are so gracious with your time, giving us yours to be here with us tonight. So let me see if I can get this one last question in, although there's a slew more after that. What are your thoughts on astral projection? Could this potentially facilitate meeting our loved ones in spirit?
We all do it all the time. A lot of times at night when we're asleep. I call it astral travel. And you'll go to a different place. And sometimes our dreams are really hard to figure out. Well, it's because you're in a different reality and we don't have a frame of reference for this in our human reality to let us understand what the different reality is. And you know how sometimes dreams feel like they're jumbled, like whoever edited the movie in our head didn't do a very good job because we're going different places with different people and they don't seem to make sense. That's because we're in and out of different realities. Have any of you ever felt like you were falling and then you woke up real abruptly? That's your spirit coming back into your body. So we all astral travel all the time. We're just not aware that we're doing it.
Oh, interesting. So, Julie, we have a few minutes left. If someone is listening, for all of our members that are listening, and for future people that might be listening to this, because we are recording this, how can people connect with you and your work?
Everything's at askjulieryan.com. Links to all my books are there. Links to, you can submit a question there. Call into my show. I do it every Thursday night. It's for 2 hours from 8 to 10 Eastern. It's a blast, you guys. People call in from all over the world and they ask questions, medical stuff, talk to deceased loved ones. We were asking spirit for love life advice last night. I kind of felt like a woo-woo Dear Abby on that one. That was kind of fun. About pets. My last caller last night, his son was in the hospital and was having trouble breathing. He was on a ventilator and he said, I'm going to go see him in the morning. I said, I think you need to go tonight. He's in phase 7 of 12. That's where the phases come in really handy. So everything's at askjulieryan.com. May I share my present for everybody?
Please.
Okay. Any of you that would like a copy of my book, I'm happy to send you a free copy. So we have Angelic Attendants, What Really Happens as We Transition from This Life into the Next. And then my kids' books, which are Angel Messages for Kids and Angel Messages for Dogs. And so if you have kids or grandkids, we'll be happy to send you a digital or an audiobook copy. Look how cute these illustrations are. They have like 15 sentences in them or something. It's all about the pictures for the little people. But if you just go to askjulieryan.com and you click on the Ask Julie button. Just put in your name, say, hey, I heard you on Fran's show, Fran's group meeting, whatever it's called.
AMF, actively
AMF.
moving forward.
I heard you with Fran. I'd love a copy of your book, and we'll send you the digital and the audiobook version as a gift. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it brings you comfort. And please share it with your family members if you feel led to do that too. And hopefully it'll bring them some comfort as well.
Thank you so much, Julie. And this has been really amazing, an opportunity that I think few get to hear from you for this hour, and we are so appreciative of it. One of the things that I took from this was how, although we are here grieving, the other side is filled with so much love and light. They're not feeling what we're feeling. And for me, I'm actually finding some comfort in that. I thank you so much. And for everybody joining us, I believe, Julie, you take on private clients too?
I
If
do.
Anybody, yeah. Can you just share a bit about that in case anybody wants to?
Sure. AskJulieRyan.com, book an appointment. I'm scheduled out a couple of months. Here's the trick. This is a trick. Get on my calendar. You'll get a confirmation email, and you'll have a little button at the bottom of it that will say reschedule. Keep that email, and when you think of it, when you're led, you're guided, click on that button, because people reschedule all the time. I have multiple people reschedule every week. This week alone, I had 2 people get in the next day, even though their appointment was a couple of months out, was several months out. So you can check that. You can call into my show on a Thursday night. That information's there as well. And then my class, if any of you want to learn to be a buffet of psychicness, like I am, I teach that, and that's so much fun. And you'll be able to really ramp up your communication with your loved ones and do medical stuff and pet stuff and past life stuff. And there's a community that gets together. There are 7 opportunities every week for free to practice together with graduates. So it's really an extraordinary community that we'd love to welcome new people to.
Great. And I suspect that also will help people maybe better connect with their own people.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Great. Well, again, Julie, thank you so much for your time. Very gracious of you. We appreciate it. And for all of you that are still with us, Julie Ryan is one of our Let's Talk Death guests. She can be found in the app. She can be found on our YouTube channel. So you can hear more from Julie in our conversation on Let's Talk Death as well. And with that, I'm going to allow everyone to sign off, say goodbye, and thank everyone for participating.
Sending you love from Sweet Home, Alabama, everybody. Mwah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. We're getting a lot of thank yous, a lot of goodbyes written. Let's see, do you want to remove? Yes. And let me remove, yes. Julie, thank you. That was amazing.
How fun.
That was amazing. I mean, I'm sure this was a mini version of what you do all the time. You were amazing.
No, thanks. It's such a joy. And if I can bring, like if I can bring just a little bit of comfort to somebody with this work, it's my honor and my privilege to do so. And thank you for all that you do to help all of these people. Because that little Ashley, she was having a tough time.
Yeah, really struggling. Her 2 people were her mother and her husband. And I believe her mother died first within a very short time, and then her husband suicided. And now she's going blind, and she's
God bless her.
she's really just having difficulty, you know, not being able to see the things, you know, so she has to keep them in her memory. Anyway, yeah, she's a sweetheart. She's a sweet woman, really sweet woman.
And you started this when your dad passed, is that right? Is that what I read?
So, no, my father died in 98, and I did what I thought people were supposed to do. You grieve through the funeral, you get ready for work Sunday night, you put your grief in a box, put a bow on it, tuck it up on a shelf, move on. With time, you're going to forget. Fast forward, anytime anybody was ill or had died, I would just be bawling. My husband would say, "You don't even know the schmuck. What are you dying?" I'm like, "Because I understand." And it was the birth of my child, my firstborn. That was a huge trigger for me, because my father wanted nothing more than to see a granddaughter from me. He has another daughter, many years older. We never grew up together, but
I got goosebumps when you said my father wanted to see a granddaughter from me. My whole body went, bzzz. Yeah. So that's validation for you.
yeah. And that, you know, this joyous life that came into my world, I was so stricken with grief. It was really a friend of mine who was working for a grief support agency. You know how, you know, it's always the last thing that you say, you know, like, "Oh, I'm tired and my breasts are sore and my dad isn't here to," you know, it was, that's what you're grieving.
Yeah.
And, you know, I have to say, I am very gifted to have had someone help me make that connection. Because otherwise I could have, you know, displaced my grief, my sadness over her presence with her presence, as opposed to recognizing that it wasn't her. It was that my father wasn't here to see her. So my relationship with my daughter could have been a very different one had I not had that gift of association.
And now, you know, he saw her every step of the way and saw her before she was born and is with her all the time. And she probably saw him when she was little, whether she remembers it or not. I bet she does. So anything I can do to help you, I am at your service. I'm free, but I'm not cheap. So I just want you to know that. And I'm delighted to help in any way. So whatever you need, you let me know. And if you want to do this again another time, whatever.
Well, first off, I think this is going to be a buzz. You know,
Good.
we have, you know, our community is growing and growing and growing. We still have people that are just not so sure and they're, you know, tipping toe. But these were people that were, there's going to be a buzz in the community.
Okay.
So yeah, I would suspect that they'll be back and more.
Okay. All right.
So
Whatever you need.
We'll talk again.
Okay.
Again. And so sorry for the mix up in time.
Oh, it was fine. My laundry got folded and my emails got sent out. Keep me posted on what you decide to do with Florida and how it goes down there, because I'll be eager to hear what you think. And good for you for having the golden ovary courage to go explore it.
I love Florida. I'm an East Coast gal. You know,
Where did you grow up?
New York. I was born in the Bronx.
Oh, wow.
Grew up in New Jersey.
You look like such a California girl.
Grew up in New Jersey, had my career in New York. I was in the intimate apparel business.
You lost the accent, girl.
I was in the intimate apparel business, Julie.
Well,
I
as
was
a
in
model?
couture. No, I imported and sold couture lingerie. I competed with La Perla. And now I'm in the business of death.
Well, look at me.
Right. Yeah,
You know.
exactly.
Yeah, going from all the things that I did. Oh, absolutely. We're led.
Yeah, but my husband, he's got a stamp on his ass that's made in LA. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to get him out.
My mother-in-law, who just came home, she was in St. Joe's, Burbank, and they told her, they said, "Do you want to go home with an NG tube?" And she said, "Absolutely not. You know, I'm ready to go. And let's do the hospice thing," which the family was freaking out about. Yeah. And I said, "I think it's great." And I'm divorced from her son, but my son, who was born in LA County, was the 6th generation of his dad's family to be born in LA County. So I get that, you know, whole LA thing. And I think I mentioned to you, he works for Fox Sports. So that's where his business is in LA. His wife's a veterinarian.
Yeah.
Sweet home Alabama girl. Both of them grew up here, but he was born in LA. And then I always knew he'd go back. But God bless him, Fran. I'm so proud of him. He was in Boston, flew in Thursday night because he's on an NFL crew. He's a graphics producer. So he's in the truck with the producer and the director and all those guys. And they're doing the Patriots game. So Grammy decides she wants to come home with hospice. He flew, got in at 9:30 this morning. He landed in Boston at like 7, got on a plane at 6 this morning, landed in LA at 9:30. And then he's taking a red eye back to Boston to help with the game. And his big bosses and stuff have all been great about it. And they said, you don't have to come back. We can fly somebody in. He said, no, it's all right. And he and I talked a lot about it. And I said, honey, go say goodbye to Grammy when you can, when she's coherent, when she knows you're there. And when you get back Sunday night, she may not be, and she may not even be here. So that's where the phases of transition come in really handy, when people are going vast distances to be with their loved ones. What's going on. I can communicate with the person who's dying, even if they can't communicate verbally. And I said to him, she's in phase 1. Come on, go get it done. So I sent flowers, and my husband said, really, you're going to send flowers? I said, yeah, let her enjoy them, instead of sending them when she's gone. What the hell?
True.
So she's got a big honking arrangement of flowers from us, and the family's coming in, and I'm just so proud of him that he came up with all of that on his own, and then checked with me. He said, Mom, what do you think? I said, I think it's brilliant.
That's great.
So,
do you come out to Los Angeles?
I do, usually a couple of times a year. So I'd love to get together with you. But
Please.
The thing that impressed me about Fox Sports was his EVP, his mentor, who's head of all NFL, everything at the network. He said, Jonathan, you do what you need to do. I want you to fly first class so you can lie down flat. I'll approve anything. Don't worry about the cost. We got it covered.
That's amazing.
I know. You wouldn't expect that out of such a big company. But I was so impressed with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So, how long will you guys be in Florida?
Not even a week. We leave tomorrow. We come back Thursday night. We have 2 solid days with an agent, other days to kind of just go on our own and, get familiar with the towns, because we're looking at such a broad area.
Yeah.
Hopefully my husband's gonna, no pun intended, buy into the
I think you're going to end up around Jupiter. That's my guess.
That's so funny. That's where my favorite right now is.
Yeah.
I think that's especially for my daughter, because, she's young still, and you got Delray, which is hip and happening. And
is she in school? What is she doing?
No, she struggled a lot in school. She has learning issues. I'm almost fearful that there was some vaccine damage, injuries. Thank you. She's been bullied in school. She's beautiful, 6-foot, gorgeous young woman, kid, and she was bullied. She's just got such a deep old soul. She was taken advantage of in so many levels. Anyway, fast forward.
People are jealous of her, probably.
School is out of the question for her. I don't want to torture her to do something that she
and you know what?
do.
Good for her. She's probably going to create something out of the box that.
Julie, let me tell you something.
I thought school was boring as hell. I couldn't wait to get out.
She chose to switch high schools in her last year.
So where did she go?
She went from Campbell Hall to New Roads. But for a kid to be so in their last year, that's pretty big.
I have a friend whose kids went through Campbell Hall. Well,
so she travels. She travels. We have her travel to be worldly, to make her own decisions. To she does volunteer programs, and so How could you help on something like that?
Oh, I work with people all over the world, and I do the medical stuff. And if there's vaccine injury, get that out. I do healings on the DNA all the time, resequence the DNA back to a normal sequence. I'm doing so much vaccine injury from the COVID shot of people around the world. Dear friends of ours were here. They live in New Orleans, and they're movie people. They lived in Santa Monica for years. They're, producers. He was a costume designer for many famous movies, and including E.T. Is that hilarious? When I first met him, I said, "Are there any movies that I would know that you worked on?" And he said, "Well, did you ever see E.T.?" And I said, "Are you kidding me? E.T.?" But he was in the hospital because he had a brain bleed.
Wow.
And, I said, no booster shots. It's frightening, the stuff I see. I can tell if
The mandates are just.
Well, I can tell if somebody's had the Pfizer vaccine, Fran, because I got this funky iridescent green color in them. And so I called a friend of mine, Christiane Northrup. Do you know her, Dr. Chris Northrup? She's a global women's health expert. I said, what is this green stuff I'm seeing in people that had the Pfizer vaccine? And she said, it's a dye that they're using. It's called luciferase, and sent me an article on it. Getting that out, getting the heavy metals out, getting the blood clotting reversed, reversing the DNA damage.
So you do that on a Zoom like this?
I do that on the phone.
Okay. And what was your rate? 200?
It's $200, but
200.
yours is pro bono. If you want me to do it, it's fine. That's fine. Or we'll get you in. I mean, we'll get you in quickly. And she does not have to be with us. You and I can do it. Just have her, I'm going to ask her spirit's permission before I scan her and do a healing on her, because it's the ethical thing to do. Just say, hey, I'm working with this gal. She wants to do an energetic healing on you, check you out. Is it okay? Just say okay when she asks. She won't even be cognizant of it, but just set that up, and then you and I can do it on a phone call.
Okay, so I have to set that up?
Yeah, with her. Talk to her about it. Or do you think just say, hey, I'm working with this woman who's an energy healer, and I'm going to have her look at me and have her look at you. Is just, if she asks you, say, okay, she's going to ask you telepathically.
Oh, okay.
That's all you have to say.
Okay.
And then I'll say, what's her name?
Liana.
I'll say, hey, Liana, I'm talking to your mom. I'm going to scan you energetically. Is that okay? And she'll go, yeah. And then I'll scan her. And if she says no, I still can, but I won't from an ethical standpoint, but we can still talk to her spirit. But I'd rather be able to scan her and do. Yeah. If she's traveling that much, she's probably had the shot. Right?
And then, no.
She hasn't? How's she getting by with that? How are you doing
Not everybody asks that they want COVID tests. They want negative tests.
Well, the other thing is, I know there are doctors. I don't know any of them. I'd like to find out who they are in case I meet them, that will shoot the injection into an apple or an orange or something.
The problem is they're not giving the vaccines to the doctors, because I have a doctor that'll do that, but they're not giving the vaccines to doctors.
Oh, they're
giving it to the pharmacies or the centers.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Unless they're doing it in Alabama, I'll fly to Alabama. If you know of a doctor.
Well, be sure you have ivermectin on hand.
I do.
And be sure you have HCQ. I made HCQ. My husband and I both had COVID. My
husband and daughter had it.
Yeah. So the key is getting on the ivermectin fast.
Yeah. And they didn't get on anything, but they, they were fortunate. Anyway, I'm going to let you go. I am going to call you back on this, and we're going to figure out when we can put this on your calendar. And I'm not expecting a freebie.
All right. That's fine. We'll make a special time for us to chat, and anything I can do to help you with your community. You got it. Just ask. You got it. All right. Have a wonderful trip, a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Email me or text me and let me know what you do, what you decide.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.